Previously on the Amalia Solaris channel.
I bet we have to make this long one. Come on! Get in there. Get in there. Get in there. What was that camera? Hello? This game sucks. I was not sure if I was going to make this video, honestly, but here we are. So I guess we're doing this.
Okay.
Donkey Kong 64 is a controversial game that is often blamed for the death of the 3D platformer, and for a long while, I did not understand where this argument came from. I played the game a fair amount as a kid, but I never got past Frantic Factory because that game, frankly, is kind of unsettling in a lot of ways. I don't know if anyone else got that vibe, but there were parts of this game that kind of freaked me out when I was little. One of the things that really scared me were these little claptrap guys and how their teeth would chase you. That was really scary to me. I don't know, it made me put the game down pretty often when I would see one of them. But I always had generally good memories of this game, despite things like the freaky teeth chasing you. I remember thinking to myself right before I left for college that I wanted to tackle the game one last time before I moved out. I managed to tackle Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie, but DK64, I just didn't have time to play it over the summer, so I left it for a few long years, swearing I'd come back to it someday. I say a few years, but now that I think about it, it was over a decade ago.
Oh, my back.
Recently, I ended up playing Donkey Kong 64 from start to finish, and oh man, I have thoughts about that game. So here is a big rant fest about Donkey Kong 64, which is not a new concept, but I will literally explode if I don't talk about it, so yeah, let's dive in. Even after sitting and digesting my feelings about Donkey Kong 64, I don't know if I liked or disliked that game. I think I liked it. I told my chat I liked it at the time of me playing it, but I really don't know. And that's the baffling part. I think I like a lot of the sections of the game, but I dislike a lot of sections of the game too. In typical review fashion, I do want to start with the pros. I think the idea of a 5-person playable cast in a platforming game is really intriguing and just kind of neat. It's not often that you can make a cast where each member feels good to play as. While I definitely prefer Diddy Kong for world traversal, I really didn't find myself complaining too much about having to play as the other Kongs. And that's actually kind of rare for me. So kudos to the devs for making a cast that all feels great to play as. In particular, I was worried that I would hate playing as Chunky Kong because with larger characters, devs often make them really cumbersome and sluggish to control, and while you can argue that it's more realistic or whatever, it's oftentimes less fun to control. And that's kind of missing the point of video gaming, right? Some people may harp about how realism makes things more authentic feeling or whatnot, but I personally can think of no greater video gaming sin than to sacrifice control fluidity for the sake of realism, especially in a game like this where you're playing as a cartoon monkey. Moving on. My next point is that I think the game's structure is very nice. It's heavily borrowed from Banjo-Kazooie in a lot of ways, but honestly, that's alright. You collect bananas to progress to each level's boss and to get medals, which allows you to get more skills from Cranky. You collect banana coins to buy upgrades from Candy, Funky, or Cranky. You collect golden bananas to unlock more levels. This is the smooth structure of the game up until the end, where it starts demanding that you've done further collecting, such as the infamous Nintendo and Rareware coins, the battle crowns, and the blueprints that can be found from the Cursplats. The crowns and the 2 coins help you unlock the final boss. The blueprints extend the doom timer on the final level, giving you more wiggle room for failure during the minigame-a-thon. All in all, not a bad structure for the game, except how you get the 2 coins is very not great, but we'll talk about that later. The music is also stellar, but it's Grant Kirkhope, so what do you expect? The dude is a legend for a reason. His rendition of Jungle Japes was incredible, and I really like the Crystal Caves theme as well. And it wouldn't be a DK64 video if I didn't bring up the DK rap being an absolute banger. 10 out of 10, no notes. Most of the levels are themed in interesting ways, I would say. By no means do I think they are perfect, but there's some innovation here. Gloomy Galleon in particular felt weird, but in a good way. The idea of bopping around a few hidden coves and exploring wrecked ships was really cool. I think thematically, it may be my favorite level. I also really liked Fungi Forest and how it included a mill, which gave me flashbacks to DKC3 in particular. I really liked how there were two versions of this level with the day and the night mechanic. I have a bit more to say about these levels, but I plan to do a level tier list video for all of the levels in this game, so please look forward to that in the future. Let's talk about the cons, and oh man, they are plenty. Remember when I said that I dropped this game as a kid because I found it to be unsettling? I kind of thought that feeling would go away, but honestly, the entire time I played DK64, it didn't. There is a weird, unsettling factor to this game that's hard to put into words, but I will do my best. If you think back to the long video I made about my ultimate Nintendo wish list, I talked about how Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo had a weird, sometimes nonsensical vibe to it. It felt a bit darker than games like Returns or Tropical Freeze, but it felt darker in a good way. It felt weird in a good way. The vibe I got in DK64 is not the same, but it's adjacent. There is a dark and unsettling vibe to DK64, but unlike its predecessors in the franchise, it's sometimes to the game's detriment. It's not necessarily an unsettling factor that's good. I attribute this unsettling feeling to the game's color palette and lighting choices, the game's levels, and the game's theming choices. Look at Frantic Factory, Creepy Castle, Hideout Helm, and somewhat Crystal Caves. These themes in a vacuum are fine, but together in one game, they add a lot of black and gray to the game's overall color palette. Thematically, these levels have a darker feeling, and that's fine, but that's also 3.5 levels out of 9, so a little less than half. But Fungi Forest also has an unsettling nighttime mode where there are undead crawling about, and there's a section with a freaky, carnivorous group of tomatoes that want to eat you. So like, maybe if we paired that with some of the bleak parts of Crystal Caves, we could say it's like 4 out of 9 worlds that have this sort of dark, cold, and dreary feeling. Plus, if you add the overworld, you also have the mobile fortress that King K. Rool is housed up in, and that area also has a constant creepy rainstorm surrounding it, and it just has like a dark vibe. And maybe some people prefer this. I just found the themes to be a bit too similar, to the point where I got tired of everything kind of having this bleak and grim feeling. I wanted more colorful levels, like Jungle Japes or Angry Aztec, to kind of break things up. Speaking of the levels, while they have interesting parts to them, a lot of them feel somehow empty. We legit have a Guinness World Record level of collectibles, but somehow they managed to make these worlds feel devoid of anything or just strangely incomplete. This was noticeable by World 2 for me. There are just parts of the game that feels like something should maybe be there, but there's like nothing. Or maybe there's like one thing and it just feels kind of like, okay, you know, like threads that lead to nowhere. Or there's just, on the other hand, vast spaces of not really much happening. The levels also seem to be a bit scatterbrained and hard to navigate, or just set up in a really confusing way. This video will likely come out before my Banjo-Kazooie World Tier List video, but one thing I say in that video, which is partially recorded as of today, is that Banjo-Kazooie does a great job at directing you to points of interest, whereas DK64 just kind of doesn't. There's an emptiness somehow with a lot of set pieces, but the set pieces aren't really designed in a way that feels purposeful. DK64 feels empty at almost every level. The overworld has a really nice premise and map, but as you traverse it, you do so silently. And there's something about that that feels off. Maybe it's because I'm used to villains like Gruntilda or Capital B chiming in every so often, and having nothing like that just felt weird and empty. It wouldn't have even have had to been like King K. Rool chiming in to have kind of filled that void that I was kind of sensing in the game. I think that having messages come in from Cranky or Funky or Candy would have been really nice. It would have been kind of a change of pace from Banjo-Kazooie to kind of further differentiate the two games. I just noticed that this overworld felt sometimes too quiet and the map sometimes felt too small. Like, there just needed to be more secrets to poke at and some form of occasional dialogue. I would have liked to have gotten to know a bit more about the characters, which I know is kind of silly because Donkey Kong games barely give you much in terms of characterization, but come on. It's Rareware. They make super lively characters all the time, and it felt like they either were not allowed to do that here or they were afraid to. What cutscenes do happen are usually when you've entered another level, and they feel like they needed to be voiced, honestly. It was so jarring having seen a playthrough of Conker's Bad Fur Day, which is mostly voice acted, and having played so much Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie, where there's at least funny noises for each character. And then DK64 has this silence about it. All the cutscenes are just subtitled and they're not actually voiced at all. But then randomly you'll have a character have a voiced line, but it may not even be in the subtitles. It's like they say something and it's just so random sometimes. I wish they would have done either the voice acting like Conker's or just given it the Banjo treatment. The silence in these scenes, especially the King K. Rool ones, they're just unsettling. It feels like the voice acting is missing. Combining the emptiness that you feel in the levels, the emptiness you feel in the overworld, and the lack of voiced cutscenes, combine that with the dreary color palette that I mentioned earlier. And I think that's why this game feels so unsettling. The minigames themselves were overused and sometimes felt very out of place given where they were set in the level. Okay, you're in a creepy castle. Let's smack flies with a fly swatter. But like, why though? You're in this huge crystal cave with all these sparkly crystals. Let's shoot claptraps in the dark? Why though? I would have rather done some clever platforming than do repeat minigames over and over again, especially Beaver Bother. Literally, do not talk to me about Beaver Bother. I will lose what sanity I have left. The minecart collectathon parts did make sense placement-wise for the most part, but were just frustrating to deal with. I managed the Jungle Japes one and didn't bother with the rest, honestly. The controls for some of these minigames were just a nightmare. The minecart madness, I think that's what it's called, minigame where you have to dodge the enemy minecarts or you lose, that was super annoying to control, and I beat some of them out of basically just spite. They weren't fun. And that's the problem with these minigames. They fail rules 1 and 2 of minigames. Make them make sense in the context of the game and make them fun. These were just super, super annoying to deal with. I do need to talk about the bosses, which were serviceable for the most part, but the random DPS check during the second dragon fight was, simply put, kind of silly. Cool idea on paper though. I failed it a few times because I didn't really understand the assignment, and sometimes it felt like I should have won when I didn't. It was just kind of weird. The fish boss in Gloomy Galleon was honestly rough because of the screen flashing so much, so horribly much. I streamed the whole thing and I had to give out an epilepsy warning because even I, a person without epilepsy, was feeling some kind of not great after my first round with that guy. The biggest offender though is the freaking cardboard cutout King K rule. If you watched my stream of this, you know what I'm about to say. I beat this boss out of pure luck. I still, to this day, do not know how to tell the real cutout from the fake one. People kept saying they could see a difference and that one was slightly darker. I could not. The whole time. I guessed my way through it and won after several attempts. I don't know if it's an accessibility thing with my eyes just being bad, I do have bad vision, or if it was my monitors making them look the same, but it was rough. And I almost, as they say, crashed out over it. And finally, I have to talk about the Nintendo coin and the Rareware coin. Now, I did play Jetpack for the rare coin. I'll be honest, I did not obtain the Nintendo coin during my DK64 playthrough. Now you might be wondering, well, how did you beat the game without it? And the answer is that I used an in-game glitch to clip through the floor in Hideout Helm and grab the boss key. I have no shame and no regrets about doing this. I know some people might wag their finger at me for it, but here's the deal. If a game is not going to respect my time playing it, I do not feel the need to respect it either. DK64 felt downright disrespectful when it had a required item locked behind playing the original Donkey Kong for some silly reason. I've already played Donkey Kong. I did it on stream for Retro Week a long time ago. It's a miserable game. I do not like it. I paid my dues. I'll gladly clip through the floor instead and just grab the key that way. Now, I did say that was the final con for this game, but there are two things that I still need to talk about that are not great for this game. Thing number one, the backtracking. There isn't much that I can really say about this other than it's just not great. Naturally, if you play this game, you are going to be required to backtrack a lot. You have collectibles that only certain Kongs can pick up, and the tag barrel is kind of spread out across the levels. There are multiple tag barrels and you have to jump into those barrels if you're playing this in the vanilla way to swap Kongs. Now, if you're playing this on your special Nintendo 64, there is allegedly a way to fix this. If you look up, tag anywhere, you might know what I'm talking about, and that does help with the quality of life of the game. I can feel the Nintendo Greninjas staring at me very, very hard right now. The other thing I want to talk about is that there are a lot of arbitrary timers in this game. That is a Rareware thing that I don't really like about their older games, is they just tend to have things that should not have timers, but they have timers. Gloomy Galleon is a really bad example of this. You have like a pad, you have to do your little instrument doot on the pad, and then it opens a door, but you have like a limited amount of time to go swim through the door to get to the next little area, which usually has a mini game for that specific Kong. And I just want to know why. It feels like unnecessary. It just feels like adding an extra layer of difficulty, and the vibe that I get from it is just that it's very unnecessary. And that's something that I want to talk about in another video called artificial difficulty. And that's when game devs decide to add timers even though it doesn't feel like there should be a timer, or they just make something a little bit extra annoying and it doesn't feel like there's any reason for it. I've noticed that that is something that is very big in Donkey Kong 64. It is also something that is in some of the other Rareware games, so it's kind of one of their shticks, if that makes sense. Donkey Kong 64 does it a lot. Like a lot more than I feel like it should. Like almost everything has a timer, and it's actually just really obnoxious. With all of these pros and cons in mind, I had two revelations about DK64. Revelation 1. It felt like a good demo for a Banjo-Kazooie game, which is hilarious because it came out after Banjo-Kazooie and utilized the same engine as Banjo-Kazooie. Revelation 2. Please don't hate me for saying this, but the weird emptiness in the levels almost made me feel like the game was like a Banjo-Kazooie creepypasta. It was very similar, but just slightly off the entire time, giving it this kind of unsettling vibe. What's weird is that with all of these complaints, I don't hate the game. I think it's a hot mess, I think it's weird, I think it's unsettling, but I still kind of like it sometimes. When I don't think about things like Beaver Bother or the fake King K. Rool fight, or that stupid jetpack and its stupid controls, I actually kind of like this game. It's so weird. Like, I feel like I should objectively hate this game for how hollow it can feel, but it does have a quirky charm to it that makes it impossible to actually dislike it, at least for me. I don't know. I can't wrap my head around these feelings, but maybe they don't need to make sense. They're feelings after all. Sometimes feelings don't make sense. If you have played this game, especially in the past few years, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you like this game? Do you not like this game? Did you like it at first but came back to it later just to find that maybe you didn't like it as much as you used to? Let me know in the comments. Before we end today's video, I just want to let you guys know about 2 announcements. Announcement number 1 is that the VTuber group I am part of, Kisa, has a YouTube now. It will feature clips of all 3 of us, both from our individual channels and from our collabs. Please give it a follow and check out my 2 business partners. Along with the clips, there will be archived VODs of our podcast, the Kisa Yapcast. So if you missed one of the episodes, you can find them over at the Kisa YouTube. Check it out. The other announcement is that I am changing my secondary channel, Amalia Solaris Clips. It is now called Amalia Solaris DLC, and things over there are going to be slightly different moving forward. Over the course of working on this channel, I have found that I do, in fact, have a love for making long-form content. However, I'd like to expand what I talk about from just gaming things, and I have other things I want to talk about. However, I would like to expand on what kind of long-form content I'm making in terms of subject, and this secondary channel is going to be kind of a space for that. In the interest of pleasing the algorithm gods, I've decided that this channel right here that you're watching right now is going to remain mostly about gaming and Nintendo-related topics. Amalia Solaris DLC will function as a content dump where I post stream clips, highlight reels, as I've been doing over there, but also other types of scripted long-form content, like what you would find on this channel, but other topics. Specifically, I am really wanting to do a mini-series on streaming and VTubing advice, and I want to talk a little bit about writing over there. I have a lot of writing, I guess you could say hot takes, particularly about VTuber lore. So I kind of want a space for that, and I think that it would be better served over there. So that is what we're going to do moving forward. I started scripting out some of these things for that channel already, and I hope to get started very soon. That being said, this channel right here, this YouTube, and my streaming over on Twitch, those are going to be the priorities for now, with uploads over on Amalia Solaris DLC happening maybe a little less frequently. At least that's the plan right now. I do have a lot of inspiration, especially for the mini-series about VTubing and streaming advice, so I might get started on recording those very soon. If you're interested in that kind of content, I'm going to leave the link to the DLC below. There'll also be a little pop-up thingy if you want to follow that over there. No pressure at all. It's going to be kind of like a content dump. There might also be just random videos as well. Thank you for watching today's video. Consider hitting the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this. I've got lots of similar videos in the works for Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64 in particular, as well as some Star Fox stuff. Keep being cool, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!